So as everyone is connecting, I will just say welcome back, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed our previous sessions from today, as well as yesterday. We are officially about halfway through this AGM, if you can believe that. I will hand the microphone over to Kasego. She will introduce our next set of speakers. Kasego, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, good mornings, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Kesawa Chika, and I'm the current legislative chair. And I'm coming to you live from South Africa. I'm a fourth year student in DUT. So it's such an honor to introduce our next speakers, Dr. Philippa Oakley and Rhiannon Oakley. They graduated from WIOC in 2012 and was awarded the Royal College Chiropractor Prize for the best research project for her work into how thoughts and feelings surrounding back pain can impact a patient's response to care. That is more of Dr. Philippa Oakley, not to confuse anyone. She began her career working for a group of private clinics with an NHS AQP contract, completing a PG set postgraduate in certificate in professional development in chiropractic with IEC, and received the Graham Hale Award for Outstanding Postgraduate Training Student. In 2014, she established her own multidisciplinary clinic, Econ Health, which fostered a reputation for excellence and received multiple awards from the Royal College of Chiropractors before being successfully pivoted to an innovative online-only health facility as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. After recognizing a gap in her knowledge, Dr. Philippa qualified as a certified personal performance coach in 2016 and established Oakley Coaching alongside her wife, Dr. Rhiannon. And in addition to roles on the BCA Communication CPD committee, Dr. Philippa now works to support clinicians across all professions in developing their practice and improving their outcomes from care through health coaching. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Philippa and Rhiannon Oakley. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was quite the introduction.
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, we are just going to try and screen share here. So, let me just do this. So, sorry, finest traditions. I'll let Rhiannon wax lyrical just while I'm working this out. Hang on.
So, thank you very much for introducing us. I'm Rhiannon Oakley and my wife is Philippa over here. And as you said, Philippa studied at WIOC in Wales in the UK. And also my background is sort of in marketing and business development. So I've worked with many international clients building their businesses, and we started Oakley Coaching in to work on sort of the coaching side and communication in both sort of what you say in your clinical practice and your customer journey in terms of sort of marketing and sort of other things you do, written communications.
Oh, sorry, folks, you might have to bear with me a second just to screen share. I will be back in 2 seconds. My apologies. So let me.
So Kasego, just monitor for when they kind of pop back in. Temporary pause, guys.
There we go. Sorry, folks. Let's try this again. I knew something was going to go awry today, so it wasn't just us getting confused about time zones. So now, can everybody see my screen here? Can I get some? Yeah, fabulous. So yes, so we wanted to talk to you today. The title that we thought we would talk to you about is about future-proofing you. I basically was chatting to Rhiannon and I said, God, if I was in your position as a student or a soon to be graduating, what would I want to know? And believe me, I've been in practice almost a decade now, and I firstly, I haven't aged a day, but secondly, I don't quite know how it's happened. So yes, so I'll let Rhiannon, obviously you've had a little bit of an introduction from us. We are certified personal performance coaches. We are a married couple who work together and have managed not to kill each other so far. And we do this as well. So just coming on and talking to other chiropractors, osteopaths, physiotherapists, helping you guys with some of the skills that might sometimes be overlooked. So there we go.
Yeah, so when we were talking about topics, for us, boundary setting came up, and sort of burnout as well, which is really important for you guys in healthcare, and also shared agenda setting, which is what we're going to come to right at the end of our talk, which we think is a really good, valuable skill to learn for your practice that you can use literally today, tomorrow, if you wanted to. So when we were thinking about the sort of analogy of the driving test, so for those of you who have learned how to drive, you'll know that you have learned all the road signs, hopefully, and actually like how you drive a car. And we were talking about this in terms of being a student. You're learning how to be a chiropractor at the moment. So you know all those safety rules, you know how to do the adjustments. But when you pass your test, when you graduate, that's when you really learn how to drive your car, or look after a patient, basically. And our experience of new graduates as well, we have discovered that it's sort of the soft skills really that are kind of need sort of improvement and need talking about, and the communication skills really that help you become better business owners as well as better practitioners as well.
It's something that we find quite a lot when you come out and you start looking at your CPD year and how you want to plan it and courses that you want to undertake. We see it a lot where new graduates will come out and their first year of CPD might include a dry needling course and learning Greston technique and learning SOT. And there's loads of hands-on techniques, which is all well and good, but sometimes we need to get back to basics and we need to learn how to talk to people and how to communicate effectively. And so there is more CPD in terms of soft skills that's coming out. It's increasingly becoming recognised as very, very important, so much so that here in the UK, health coaching, which is what we do, has become part of the NHS long-term plan. So it's become recognised as that important that it's one of 5 key parts of the NHS long-term plan. So what we would say is, as students, as new graduates, really try and learn how to talk to people. It sounds really silly, but your communication with your patients is not only what's going to make the job enjoyable for you, because we love getting to know our patients. They become, in many cases, they become like our friends. We get to know their family members. We get to know so much about them. But as Rhiannon said, in order to be a successful clinician, if you eventually want to open your own practice, you're going to need to learn how to communicate with people. But also you'll need to know some of the skills that we're going to talk about today that are going to help you in terms of your career longevity, because everybody is busier than we've ever seen them before at the moment, aren't they? Particularly as a result of the COVID pandemic here in the UK, the NHS is inundated. People can't get an NHS physio appointment for love nor money. So they're increasingly turning to people like ourselves. They're turning to chiropractors, osteos, physios to get that care that they can't get elsewhere. And so we have to be really, really conscious of boundary setting, managing our time, managing our own personal health and well-being as well. And that's something that can get neglected. So,
and sorry, just very briefly, just to say, some people are very natural with sort of coaching communication, and we've seen it ourselves. It's not to be confused with sport coaching, which is honestly what before I even realized what it was, that's what I thought coaching was sport coaching, but it's nothing to do with that at all. And we have found in our experiences, those who are still natural, have natural abilities with coaching, it's still really valuable to formalize those skills as well.
So you can stand at the side of your treatment room going, go team, go, if you want to with your patient, but that's more sports coaching than what we do. So, so this is me, fresh-faced, lobbing my mortarboard,
See,
I think they call it.
Hasn't aged a day.
Aged a day. Have inside. When I first got into practice, sorry, everybody loves, they love the stories of being a student. When I first got into practice, as Kasege said in the introduction, I started working for a very well-established group of clinics who had what's called an NHS AQP contract. And for those of you not in the UK, the National Health Service developed these any qualified provider contracts. And they were to enable NHS patients to seek private healthcare that basically the NHS would cover. There were very strict boundaries as to what we could and couldn't do, very strict referral process. But it basically meant that we were able to see quite a diverse range of patients that we wouldn't necessarily see in private practice. And it actually became the topic of a piece of research that I did, where we were looking at the different characteristics between NHS patients and private patients and looking at those characteristics and comparing them with outcomes from care. So it's really interesting. On the flip side of that, when I was working in these clinics, I saw a range of patients that you potentially wouldn't see strictly in private practice. And one patient who stuck with me in particular, I remember her, I can picture her now walking down the corridor towards me, but she wasn't walking, she was on crutches, and it probably took her the best part of 15 minutes to get down the hall to my treatment room. And sorry, do you all have a software update thing pinging up in the middle of a screen? Okay, sorry, this is my computer, it's just really, hang on, go away. There we go. It's my computer, it's just trying to sabotage me today. She got into the treatment room and I asked her to sit down and she couldn't sit down. She propped herself kind of leaning against the wall, supporting on these crutches. And I thought, oh God, okay. And started doing the initial consultation, started asking her a few questions. And eventually I got to the question of, so how did your pain start? And she turned around and she said, well, my pain started when my husband tried to put my head through a brick wall. And the look of horror on most of your faces is pretty much the look of horror that was reflected in my face as well. And I remember sitting there thinking, where do I go? What do I say? It still makes me shiver when I think about it, because I was just so unprepared. And I knew that we ran a chance of encountering patients like this, but I couldn't remember what we had been told at university, what the safeguarding rules were around adults, what the referral thing was, whether I should be asking her about this, whether I should just try and move the conversation on and focus strictly on the pain, or where I should go. And so I was finding myself with these patients. That's just one example of many that I remember experiencing. And I would come home at the end of a day and I remember saying to my friends, my family, that I felt more like a counsellor than a chiropractor. And I didn't know how to help these people. I was conscious that I ran the risk of overstepping my professional boundary. I was very conscious that there was more help that these people needed that potentially I couldn't give, but I also knew that there were things that I could do in the treatment consultation that could be valuable, that could be really, really helpful. And so this is where we then started to look around and say, well, you know, what more training is there? How can I improve these soft skills? How can I learn to communicate with these people better? How can I help them? Because at the end of the day, I was coming home and I was being kept up at night worrying about these patients, and I was emotionally exhausted, and I was just so conscious, as I said in my bio, so conscious that there was a massive gap in my knowledge, and I knew that it could be filled by something. And it tied in at a time when Rhiannon was also having similar issues with some of her marketing clients, of all people, in terms of perhaps not being aligned in terms of what you were hoping to achieve.
Absolutely. So I just took my experience and basically my own agenda onto how to boost and promote this business. And these brands, these owners had a different idea. And there was just this sort of gap between our understanding of what they were aiming for and what I was aiming for. And then I found coaching.
So we then, as we said, we looked into coaching. We realized that it wasn't standing at the side of a pitch and helping people hit a ball further and things, although incidentally one of Rhiannon's coaching clients does now have a better golf handicap.
I'm very proud of that fact,
which he says is the result of coaching. We're not quite sure how, but we're gonna roll with it. So this is a brief explanation of what health coaching is, and it's basically, in a nutshell, it's a way of communicating with people. It's a semi-structured form of conversation where we're hoping to raise people's awareness of behaviours that are helpful, behaviours that aren't helpful. We're looking to explore options that are available to them in terms of how they can move forward out of a situation, really hoping to empower them to become active participants in their own healthcare. And again, this is something that we're increasingly being encouraged to do. We're moving away from this doctor-centered model of us telling people what to do and moving more towards facilitating patients in identifying the choices that are right for them. And we support them in doing that. Because again, we might have an idea of what we think is best. We might think, well, actually, I need to do some manual therapy on you. We need to do a couple of joint adjustments. And the patient might turn around and say, actually, I'm really not comfortable with that. I would prefer massage, acupuncture, exercise. And so we have to work with them to support them in their decisions whilst using our expertise as practitioners. So we combine the two. And that's really where health coaching can be invaluable.
Absolutely. So just to add to that as well, coaching is also about sensitively challenging, promoting that trust, that rapport as well is vital to building that relationship with your patient.
So this is where it sits in terms of interventions with patients. This is where coaching, I'm going to point to my screen, but you can see top right. This is where coaching and motivational interviewing, which is very similar, this is where they sit in terms of patient interventions. So on the left, we have the more kind of information, education type things where we might be giving patients a report of findings in paper format. We might be giving them a leaflet. And over to the right-hand side, you've got these more active interventions. And what we know is that these active interventions, so motivational interviewing, telephone coaching, group education and peer support and things like that, these are the more effective strategies. So again, the emphasis now is on these more active interventions than on giving care plans. Absolutely still do that and still give care plans, still give written education information and things like that. But we need to be incorporating these active interventions as well. And this is why we thought this was such a relevant topic for you all, because this is where the future of health coaching, the future of healthcare is going. We are moving over towards better conversations with people. We are moving over towards empowering patients to play an active role in managing their own healthcare, as opposed to being passive recipients of information from us. So this is something that in the future we are all going to need to know more of, and we're all going to need to know how to do this better.
Where you draw on the responsibility and the motivation, that's where you get the behavioural change. So this is why it's really important to your patients. This is all the benefits. As you'll see, there's lots of things in there that we've already talked about. But actually, in our opinion, this is also the benefits for you as a practitioner as well.
So as a practitioner, it might not directly impact your health, although you could argue that better stress management would impact your health. But these are all things that we would hope that you would see as a result of learning coaching skills and improving your conversations with patients. And certainly as a new graduate for myself, that enhanced confidence, that ability to feel confident in the words that I'm saying to patients, in the language that I'm using, that would have been invaluable for me, as well as greater resilience. So I would have been better equipped emotionally to cope with the burden of being solely responsible for many of these patients. So this leads us on to another important topic, which is burnout. This is something that affects everybody. You certainly experienced burnout at college, didn't you?
I have, yes. I'm sure as students you will be very familiar with student night. And at college, I was going full-time college, and I was also working every weekend and picking up shifts during the week as well. And in my last year, as well as going out in the evening with my friends, I experienced this sort of burnout feeling and recognized actually that I was making myself very ill, and managed to recognize that fact. And that's where it's really important for you guys to recognize where you're not having a balanced life, because as healthcare professionals, I know that you want to care for people, and that is deep down exactly what you're doing right now and why you are a chiropractor. But you can't help people when you're not looking after yourself.
So burnout is something, if you start Googling burnout in healthcare at the moment, you will see there is a massive influx of research into burnout in healthcare practitioners as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the 2020 Medscape physician review, when they looked at burnout rates amongst healthcare practitioners, it was sitting at around 43%, which is down slightly on what it was. It was 46%. But that was last year. We've now had the COVID-19 pandemic. And so burnout rates have, in many cases, they've tripled. We've got GPs who are retiring at 3 times the rate that they used to. And it's a very real problem for healthcare practitioners. Now, as new students and new graduates, you are going to be sitting in stage 1 when you first graduate. It's the honeymoon. We're all enthusiastic. We're let loose on patients, and it's what we've been waiting for. It's what we've been training for so long. And you sit in that honeymoon period, and then as your practice gets a bit busier, perhaps you're trying to juggle life and family and a busy diary. You might start moving into stage 2 where you feel a little bit stressed. We certainly, in my graduating year, we had quite a high turnover of people who left their clinics at the end of year 1, seeking a better opportunity. Actually, we would argue that what had happened there was stagnation, was that they had become a little bit jaded in terms of, the career perhaps not being what they had expected it to be, perhaps not managing things as well.
Not being supported as well in the right areas.
Not being supported. And so then a lot of us then decided that it was a sensible time to set up our own clinics, which then pushed us all into stage 3, chronic stress, where it becomes more of an ongoing problem. Really, as you can see from this, the physical exhaustion kicks in a lot sooner than the mental and emotional exhaustion. But you can see that the physical exhaustion can kick in quite soon after that honeymoon period. This is the standardized model for the development of burnout, I should say. It's slightly simplified on the more complex one, but it's definitely something that I would urge you to keep in mind, that as you hit that onset of stress, as you start feeling a little bit flustered when you come into practice, that you need to start looking after your physical health at that point. Look after your mental and emotional health at that point, definitely, but the physical exhaustion, having that time out from clinic is important. You will remember me when I first graduated, where we would have a lot of what we call busy bragging, where people would say, I'm treating 120 patients a week and I'm treating 150 patients a week. And actually, that's not necessarily impressive, because you will hit that physical exhaustion sooner. So don't let your enthusiasm overtake your need for physical, mental, and emotional rest as well. In terms of career longevity, you have to find that balance, and the sooner you find that balance, the better.
And it's different for everyone as well, so please bear that in mind.
So, oh yes, sorry, there's a great story about a week off. So I always forget that story. So when it comes to taking time off, it took me 8 years to take a week off work. So I had been in practice for 8 years, and I think
We still haven't been on honeymoon.
No, sorry. I'd had 3 days off for our wedding. And other than that, other than the occasional day off here or there, I hadn't had a consistent amount of time off ever. And I was weirdly proud of that fact. And at year 8, Rhiannon and I were talking and saying, oh, it would be really lovely to go to Italy for a week. And I was stressing about it. And I remember talking to one of my lovely, lovely patients who I'd been treating for about 8 years by that point. So we were, we knew each other pretty well. And I said to her, but I just, the clinic's not going to cope without me for a week. What are you guys going to do? What if somebody has an emergency? Where are you going to go? And she turned around to me and she said, Philippa, you're not that flipping special. Go on holiday. Now, she didn't say flipping, but I've toned it down because, we're in public here. But it was a bit of a reality check for me to recognize that actually not having time off in that time wasn't big, it wasn't impressive. And that led us on to then thinking about boundary setting. And again, this is something that perhaps as healthcare practitioners, I know you've found it with your coaching clients, that we're not necessarily that great at. Even one of my coachees I was talking to on Thursday was saying, well, I'm working 11-hour days, my kids are really young, I want to find a better work-life balance, I'm really tired because I'm working 55 hours a week. But she felt that she had set a precedent and she didn't know how to roll that precedent back. So, you know, her patients had got used to being able to see her at 7 a.m. or, you know, 7 o'clock at night, and they got used to her moving the diary around to fit them in if they called and they needed an urgent appointment.
Yeah, with huge gaps as well. I mean, block booking is so important for you to keep going anyway, and to keep up with your admin.
Yes.
But also a client of mine as well really struggled with boundary setting on WhatsApp. So she just absolutely hated using WhatsApp, but her patients would still message her on it at any time of the day, and she would reply and she would book in the appointments or cancel the appointments, and she just felt like she was at work the whole time, and in the end she disabled WhatsApp.
So there's numerous examples that we could give you of how easy it is for the boundaries to become blurred, and at university it's hammered into you about professional boundaries, and you know, in terms of keeping that boundary, but they can be a lot more subtle than perhaps many of us appreciated at university. So in terms of boundary setting, first things first, as we've touched upon, is get clear on your priorities. You know, is it a priority for you to finish work at 5 o'clock every evening to go to the gym? Is it about a priority for you that you do not message your patients over the weekend, you know, that you have your weekends off? You need to get clear on what's important to you, and then make sure that your work schedule works around that, and have these conversations with your practice managers. Have these conversations straight away, because as you'll see further down this list, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. If we can be upfront and consistent with what we want and what our expectations are and where our boundaries lie, then we don't muddy the waters, we don't confuse everything, and everybody knows where they stand.
And we did this in our clinic, is that at Christmas time we would open up until 12 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and then we'd literally close for that one day, Christmas Day, and you love Christmas.
I do love Christmas.
And then we'd come back to work again, and in the end we thought, do you know what, this isn't going to work with a family when we've got children. So we put the boundary in place one year, and it was great because the diary was so booked and full before Christmas and then after in the new year, and we had such a great break as well.
Yeah.
And nothing bad happened.
No, there's always that concept of, if I do this, what's the worst that could happen? And actually, when we didn't have the boundary in place, do you remember that year I had somebody call up at 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve wanting an appointment, and I was already 2 mulled wines in, so that wasn't going to happen. But that's an example of where those boundaries can get a bit confused.
Just about being very clear, doing the message. Social media is so easy nowadays. You can have those messages on a reply back, really easy to say, I'm not available right now, but I'll get back to you at X time in the morning.
So put the boundary in place. The next thing that we would say is there a theme? This is something that, you know, Rhiannon's coachee with the WhatsApp was something that we had to be aware of. If you are consistently replying to your patients at 9 o'clock at night, and then you're getting annoyed that you're getting messages at 9 o'clock at night, you perhaps need to look at whether there's a theme that's happening and whether there's a message that you might subconsciously be putting out that makes it okay for them to do that. Now, I can be a little bit hard-nosed about it. Because if a patient messages me, I don't read the messages until I'm in my working hours, mainly because I know that
she does now.
I do now, but it's such a slippery slope. So you do have to be careful. And in a similar vein to my lovely patient telling me to go on holiday, you're not the only one who can help. And again, this is it's harsh but true. It's a little bit of tough love. We like to think that we are the best at what we can do. We like to think that we're the very best person who can help that patient, but in reality, there are other people around you who can help them. And we would also encourage, and we do encourage, our new graduates to form professional relationships with the other practitioners who are in your local area, the osteopaths, the physios, the other chiros. So when we go on holiday now, it's fine. I can divert the clinic phone to one of our local clinics. I can tell my patients and say, look, this person's going to be there to look after you. We've got that relationship, and that makes it so much easier for us, and it makes it it enables me to continue practicing in the way that I want to.
I think the thing to remember there is it's not competition, it's collaboration.
Yeah,
because the patient is the key at the end of the day.
Yeah,
the focus.
With boundaries, and with setting those boundaries with your patients, don't take it personally if a patient does kick off at you. I always say, if a patient kicks off at you because you've put a boundary in place that exists for your emotional and mental health, if they kick off, it's more sign that the boundary was needed. It will happen, it does happen, and it's not personal to you. Okay, so try not to confuse the relationship as well. You will find, as I have with many of my patients, they've seen me through new graduation up to getting married, having a family and things like that. But make the relationship very clear. When they're in clinic with you, it's a professional relationship. If you're friends and you're meeting them down the pub afterwards, perhaps now is not the time to start examining their back and things like that. I know what happens at chiro parties, and we want to make sure that that relationship is separate. So over to you.
Yes, so shared agenda. So this is the skill that we really think that would add really a good value for you right now. So
we forgot where to. So we wanted you guys to leave today with a skill that you could put into practice pretty much straight away. Now, shared agenda setting is heavily evidence-based. We should all be doing this. But when you look at the research, only about 36% of clinicians bother to set an agenda with their patients. And it is so important. This is the evidence behind shared agenda setting. Okay, I won't do death by PowerPoint. I won't read the slides off to you. But when you look at the information here, reduced hospitalizations, improvements in our ability to communicate with our patients, fewer surprise topics at the end of the day. Even this one, improving clinicians' understanding of patient concerns. 75% of clinicians were saying that shared agenda setting meant that they were better able to understand the patient in front of you. This is massive. It's enormous, and we should all be doing it. But 75% of us aren't.
I think we've missed what shared agenda setting is.
That's okay, I'll let you take over.
So shared agenda setting is when a patient comes in with their own agenda, so they know what they want to talk to you about. And then you as a practitioner, you've read through the notes, or you've read through the new patient intake form. So you've got your own agenda of what you want to do, what you want to examine, what you want to ask them. So basically the shared agenda is about joining those two separate agendas, having the conversation about what they are, and then saying, this is the time that we've got available for these, looking at these, and then asking what the patient's priority is of that. This will help you build trust and rapport, which is vital, especially with new patients, to make sure that they feel listened and understood.
So shared agenda setting, again, a huge list of benefits here for you. One of the things that we hear most often with coaching, with motivational interviewing, with shared agenda setting, with shared decision making, is people go, how on earth am I going to have time to do this in a 45-minute new patient exam or an hour-long new patient exam? How am I going to find time to do this? That is a massive assumption on our part. We know that time is limited in the exam, but actually, when we have a shared agenda, when we know what it is that the patient wants to discuss, we know what it is that we need to discuss, and we agree upon that, you have a better idea of what you need to get covered in that exam. And this for me was massively freeing when I realized that actually you can put some things off to the next consultation. If they come into you and they say, well, I'm here to talk to you about my headaches, which have been absolutely crippling, and then I've got this low back pain that's stopping me from working. And you say, okay, is there anything else? And they go, oh, well, my elbow's a bit sore, but that's been niggling for years. you can then, with shared agenda setting, you can agree on what you want to focus on in that session, and you can put other things off to a next consultation. That is okay to do. There are some issues that can be postponed for follow-up.
With their consent.
With their consent. So when you have extra time and you have a more structured consultation, you actually have more time available to you. And that is really, really important for, you know, keeping your practice running smoothly, making sure that patients stay happy so you're not running late, and making sure that you get home in time for dinner, which is very important for me.
In reality, shared agenda setting literally just takes, well, understanding what the patient wants literally takes a minute or so, and that will save you so much time ultimately. I'm not sure if you've ever had a patient at the end of the session where you've said, oh, is there anything else? Whoops. And then they come out with this whole barrage of other things that they want you to do, and you've only got 2 minutes left. So to save yourself from feeling very rushed, from feeling like you're doing a bad job and feeling like you have to quickly run through an examination and then adjust them, do it at the beginning, and then you can manage expectations and build that trust, build that rapport.
So when it comes to shared agenda setting, there are basically 5 simple steps for it. So there are 5 questions that you should be thinking about at the start of every patient encounter. So the first one is, what are your concerns for today's appointment? So that's the question that you are asking the patient. What are your main concerns for today's appointment? The next question is, what are my main concerns for today's appointment? So with a new patient, they might come in with you know, a certain amount of things that they want to discuss. And I might have some other things that I want to rule out. I want to rule out the red flags, want to make sure that there are no pathologies. With an existing patient, it might be that, you know, last time I noticed that they had a slightly decreased reflex at, you know, L5 on the left, and I want to recheck that. So that's a main concern for today's appointment. So you can see how we end up with our own agendas that we need to follow. So what are the patient's main concerns for today's appointment? What are my main concerns for today's appointment? Does the patient have any specific requests? You would be absolutely amazed at the amount of times that something comes up at the end of the appointment and you say, well, why didn't you bring this up at the start? And they say, oh, well, you didn't ask. So the amount of times that a patient has brought a bit of paper in, they've brought an MRI report that they want me to have a look at, or they've got some paperwork that they need filling in for their insurance company or something, and it's not mentioned until they're almost walking out the door, and you think, oh, if you just said this to me when we first started. So do you have any specific requests, anything specific that you need me to do that you want covered in this appointment? Sorry, Rhiannon, because this is where I talk, because it's about clinical stuff, so I start banging on. So 4th question, how many of these concerns can be addressed today? How many of them can be deferred to a later appointment? So when you are asking the patient what the matter is, what they want to discuss today, give them time to answer and keep asking them, is there anything else, until they get to the end of that list. So if they come in and you say, what are your main concerns? And they go, my headaches, my lower back pain, my elbow. Is there anything else? Oh, I've got a sore toe. Is there anything else? I've got a letter to my GP that I need you to sign. Is there anything else? And you keep going until you have that list. Once you've got that list, how much of that can be reasonably addressed in today's appointment? How much of it is non-urgent and could be deferred to the next one? Remember that when you address the urgent ones first, when you address the priorities, the patient's priorities, you are going to have a happier patient. The patient is going to know that you know everything that they want to address. They're going to know that you've got that. They don't need to panic that something is going to be forgotten. And then you can agree with the patient what you're going to address today and what might be left to another time. So sometimes that looks like just simply going, okay, so where do we start with this lot? So you've got your list in front of you and you go, okay, so where are we going to start? And the patient can then go, well, actually, you know, my headaches haven't been as much of a problem for the past week. Can we start with the lower back? And so the patient can then start to set the agenda themselves, which is really, really useful. And another thing that you might find helpful, because I quite like giving you guys phrases that you can use in clinic, is if the patient brings in a list and it's 15 appointments long, literally saying something like, I'm not sure we can realistically address all of these in 45 minutes, or I'm not sure we can do all of this justice. so that I can examine you safely, so that we can make sure that we look at this in as much detail as you and I both want to do. Is there anything that could be deferred to the next appointment? Is there anything that we could look at another time? So that's a nice little phrase to bear in mind. So what are your main concerns? What are my main concerns? Any specific requests? What concerns want to be addressed today and what can be deferred to a later appointment? And the fifth and final question is, if we have disagreements about priorities, how can these be addressed? Because for you, naturally, if a patient comes in and they've got, a history of rapid weight loss and night sweats, you might want to prioritize that and the patient might not. So you might have this conflict of priorities. So how are we going to manage that? How are we going to agree upon the priorities? And certainly that's something that, it can be helpful to be honest and just say, look, I'm a bit concerned about this, so I would really like to discuss that. I understand that you want to discuss this. Can we agree to get both of these covered in the appointment? So those are your 5 main questions for shared agenda setting. When you were in clinic on Monday, or whenever you start in clinic, if you're new students and you're not yet in clinic, bear these questions in mind, because it's such a simple process to follow, and it will reduce the chances of patients going, oh, there's just something else that I wanted to address. And it will make sure that you know everything that's going on with that patient, that you can structure the appointment around those, that you can manage their expectations. And as we've talked about, that helps build trust, it builds rapport, the patients know that you've got their back. But also for you as a practitioner, in terms of future-proofing you, in terms of protecting you going forwards, it makes the clinic day very manageable. It means that you're not going to miss anything when you're tired, you're not going to miss anything, any diagnoses, you're not going to miss any concerns, you're going to have happier patients. That's going to make your work life so much easier. I would say, trust me, but happy patients, happy life. That's what they say. They used to say happy wife, happy life, but for me, it's happy patients, happy life.
So yes, tips for agenda setting, there you go. So I think we'll probably take some questions after that, but just focus on what it is that they want to do. I mean, from my point of view as a practice manager for the clinic, I always was looking at the outcomes from care, so the problems and everything, and I always wanted to make sure that was also taken into account from the customer journey, from all communications, from stepping into the clinic, the conversations they were having in reception, all throughout their emails and notifications and things like that. So I would also add that onto that list as well.
We've got a lovely little graphic that we can share with you that has an example of how we would help encourage our patients to set an agenda, and it was something that we would display in reception. And from my recollection, it says something like, try to think about what it is that you would like to get out of today's appointment, just to start the patient thinking about stuff that they would like to cover. And at the bottom of this list, you'll see, don't get sidetracked. That is a massive one, because I used to be terrible for this. When a patient would say, oh, I've got low back pain, I go, oh, okay, so your low back, when did that start? And what does it feel like? And what would you rate it out of 10? Don't get sidetracked with going into the diagnostic questions. Focus on that list. It's getting that list first. So they've got low back pain. Okay, what else? Okay, so you've got headaches, you've got shoulder pain. What else? Okay, you've got a sore wrist. What else? And the same if the patient does it as well. If they prematurely start diving into more information about their elbow pain, they say, oh, well, it clicks when I do this, and you still haven't got the list. Saying to them, that's really interesting. I really, really, really want to hear more about that. But I just want to check, is there anything else that you want to cover from today's appointment? So keep bringing them back. Keep circling yourself back as well. If you find that you've jumped into some diagnostic questions, literally saying to the patient, I'm really sorry, I've got ahead of myself. Can I just check, is there anything else that you wanted to discuss at today's appointment? So there are simple little ways to do it and to kind of bring yourself back to getting that list, to that agenda setting. So future-proofing you, in terms of, just kind of summarising everything that we've talked about today, don't neglect your soft skills. Please consolidate your learning, perhaps look at formalising your soft skills in some way, because it is so important for all of these reasons. It will keep you practicing, hopefully, for years to come, perhaps not as long as the lady on the left, who some of you might know as Jean Coffell. She was still practicing at 91, 70 years in practice. I don't know how she was doing it, but if you want to keep practicing for that long, putting some skills in place, formalizing your learning, developing your soft skills, really trying to master your communication with your patients, whilst using skills like shared agenda setting, coaching skills, shared decision making. That's a story for another time, perhaps another AGM. Those are the things that are going to help you with your career longevity, not just because it will make you happier, make your patients happier, lead to better outcomes, but also because this is something that we need to do. It's where healthcare is heading. And if we want to continue to be evidence-based or evidence-informed practitioners, we need to be keeping abreast of these healthcare developments and recognizing them as being an important part, as important to our skill set as our hands-on manual skills.
Great. So that's us for now. So we'll take some questions in a moment. But we also wanted to invite you to our private Facebook group. So please join us there to carry on the conversation about coaching skills and shared agenda setting and your own experiences as well. It would be really wonderful. Really want to hear from you. So it's the Oakley Coaching Clinical Support and CPD. And we would love to take your questions.
Shall I stop screen sharing? That'd be helpful.
Oh, you're muted.
Who's going to talk? I was going to ask a question quickly if I can. I'll just pop in, and then anyone else, go ahead and raise your hand or pop in after me. I wonder, because many of us starting off as new grads feel a lot of pressure to fill up as much as we can, be present as much as we can, just try to attract as many patients as possible. So how do you kind of rationalize the guilt of saying, okay, if I'm not available 12 hours a day at my clinic, I might miss that patient, or I might miss a new patient or a patient that I have that has an urgent issue, especially as a new grad starting out where, your finances really do matter. What's some advice that you could give for that whole guilt complex?
So firstly is work out where the guilt is coming from.
Yeah, I was going to say guilt is, this one's a very special topic.
Yeah, guilt is a big one. Guilt and shame are two of my favorite topics. Work out where the guilt is coming from. I think it's really honest to hear you say, the finances is a big aspect of it. We have always found that practitioners who are consistent build busy practices. So being consistent doesn't mean being available at all times. It means showing up when you say you're going to show up. It means doing what you say you're going to do. If you say to the patient you're going to call them the next day, it's calling them the next day at the time that you agreed. It's not being in clinic from 8 a.m. until 8 o'clock at night. You will, in your career, have patients who you can't see, whether that's because you're too busy, or whether it's because you're at home because you needed to go home and rest that day. There will be patients that you miss, but missing those patients is not going to stop you from building a busy practice. Being consistent with your values, showing up when you say that you're going to show up and doing what you say you're going to do, doing your very best for your patients will help you build a busy practice, okay?
There will always be that time where you sneak in a patient 15 minutes before, half an hour before, and it will snowball into something where you start recognizing that you're actually in that stressed zone. And as I said before, you're all healthcare providers. Your core is that you care for people, but you need to recognize that actually filling up your own cup before you fill up others is really important, because you can't look after people when you're stressed.
Rhiannon used to say that my patients would get the best of me and she would get the rest of me. She would get the dregs that were left at the end of a day. And actually, something that really helped me combat the guilt was recognizing that I am not responsible for getting my patients better. Not responsible for getting them better. I'm responsible for doing the very best that I can and delivering care to the very best of my capability. But I am one small part of a jigsaw that will get those patients better. And if they can't see me for that piece of jigsaw at that time, that's okay, because there's other stuff that goes into making them better. So I'm not responsible for getting my patients better. I'm responsible for doing what I do to the very best of my capability. But there are other factors in getting people better that we have no control over. I have no control over the fact that my patient has got a really unsupportive boss who makes them, you know, work 15 hours a day. I have no control over the fact that their marriage is falling apart. I have control over what I do in the treatment room and how I help them there. And in terms of the guilt of not being available for those patients, they will go elsewhere. They will find somebody else who is willing to, you know, go beyond, and, you know, who is willing to work until 10 o'clock at night. But that person, and I know this because my friends are these people, one of them, I love her, but she'll be in clinic until 10:30 at night, and she is frazzled. And remember as well that there is so much that can be done that doesn't involve hands-on care. There is a lovely piece of research that I'll have to dig out for you guys that came out, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, so it's brand new, that says that even the patient history taking, even the therapeutic encounter, that conversation with you begins the healing process. So even without physically laying your hands on a patient, you can start to get them better. So even if you can't see that patient, what else is there that you could do? Could you direct them to some resources? Could you have better information on your website that they could look at? Is there somebody else locally who, you know, perhaps starts at work later in the day that you could direct them to? You know, I always found that my guilt was alleviated if I did something for them. And I've never found that a patient has been angry with me or been upset in any way when I have turned around and said, I'm really sorry, but I finish work at 8 o'clock. You know, I've never had a patient be upset with me, because it's perfectly reasonable. I wouldn't expect, you know, my doctor to squeeze me in at 8 o'clock at night. You know, it's just something that we find a lot in chiropractors, actually, that we you know, expect to work all hours for these patients, and we just can't.
And I think very briefly as well, I'm just thinking about one of my clients at the moment, actually, because he was saying that actually the pandemic has improved his boundary setting, because he can now actually set the appointments that he just wasn't available, and then patients started to say, okay, well, when are you available, instead of managing it around their hair appointments.
Yeah,
because you will find that sometimes people's hair appointments are more important than chiropractic, and it's not true.
We just have one more question from the chat. So Pega asks if there are any resources that you might recommend to read more about shared agenda setting, or even like sample intake forms where you could kind of incorporate those 5 questions.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. So we will share some more in our group, because it's possibly easier and quicker to get that to you via that today. In terms of resources on shared agenda setting, we've got quite a few. We have got an online course that we are currently working on, which will cover some more of these skills that we will, you know, share more about as well, that will hopefully be quite helpful for you all. But yes, we have some resources, and we will share those with you, and perhaps as well, in case there's anybody who isn't on Facebook, perhaps I could send those to yourself or Sophie, Sarah, and you could disseminate them amongst the delegates as well. There's lots of information in the UK. The King's Fund has done some information on shared decision making, shared agenda setting. The NHS as well has got some more information in their long-term plan as well. So there's quite a lot of evidence-based research, as well as betterconversations.co.uk has quite a lot of useful information on there as well, and the Health Foundation. So a couple of websites that you could go and have a look at.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, I think that is it, unless there are any further questions. I'm scrolling through the list here. Not that I can see. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the both of you. I know schedules are confusing, and I'm really appreciative that you were able to join us here. You had some fantastic tips and tricks. Actually, myself and Jordan were messaging each other during your presentation saying, oh my gosh, that's us. Like, we identify with that so much, just in bearing the brunt of your patients, right? So I hope everyone enjoyed this. I will send you a recording of your presentation just as soon as it's all finished. If anyone has any kind of further questions on how to get in touch with these 2 tremendous people, let Sophie know, let myself know, and we can connect you. Otherwise, please feel free to stay on if you'd like to watch more presentations or join us tomorrow, whatever you like. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us. We really enjoyed speaking with you and sharing our skills and knowledge on this. We would just wish you so much luck as students and as new grads as well.
Yeah.
So,
and please don't, I know as a student as well, it can sometimes feel a bit daunting when you're talking to other chiropractors and you might feel a bit stupid asking some of the questions that you do. I have asked every stupid question that exists. There are no stupid questions, and you know, please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you've got questions about stuff like that.
yeah,
Rhiannon and I love answering questions. We love helping, so please, you know, feel free to drop us a message and get in touch, and we'd love to help.
Yeah, just always look for the support that you need. You're never alone. And you've got a lovely support group here as well. So always just check in.
Utilize it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, thank you all. Have a great rest of the AGM.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Thank you both so much. All right, I will kind of take us right into our next